The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above the gathered delegates like a cathedral, made of crystal and light. Jake Harrison sat in the human section and watched the alien representatives talk among themselves. Their voices filled the air with sounds that ranged from musical chirps to deep rumbles that made the floor vibrate under his feet. Jake had been Earth's ambassador for 12 years now. He had seen the same scene play out dozens of times before. The humans would make a request or proposal, and the aliens would listen with barely hidden amusement. Today was no different except that the request was bigger than usual. The delegation from Earth wishes to contribute warships to the Galactic Defense Fleet, announced the council speaker. The ancient being's voice echoed through the vast chamber without any visible amplification device. A wave of laughter rippled through the assembled aliens. The Xanthari delegate stood up from his crystalline chair. His body looked like it was carved from blue diamond, and his voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Warships?" he said with obvious delight. What could the humans possibly offer? Their chemical rockets that barely reached their own moon? More laughter filled the hall. Jake kept his face calm even though his hands wanted to form fists under the table. Lisa Brooks sat next to him, and he could feel the tension radiating from her body like heat from a fire. She was Earth's military representative, and Jake knew that every joke and insult hit her harder than it hit him. The Vorthak delegate rose from his seat with a sound like wet leather being dragged across stone. His massive body was covered in gray skin, and dozens of tentacles moved constantly around his head like angry snakes. "Perhaps the humans could send us their nuclear weapons," he said, in a voice that sounded like gravel being crushed. "We could use them as entertainment during our leisure time." The laughter grew louder. Jake had heard variations of this same joke for over a decade. To the galactic community, humans were primitives who had barely figured out how to leave their own planet. Earth had been part of the galactic community for 200 years, but they were still treated like children, who had wandered into an adult conversation. The Helian representative stood with fluid grace. Her skin looked like liquid silver and moved in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "While we appreciate humanity's enthusiasm," she said in a voice like singing crystal, "perhaps they should focus on what they do best. Their agricultural products are quite popular, and their entertainment media has a certain primitive charm." Jake stood slowly and walked to the speaking platform in the center of the hall. The laughter died down, but he could still hear whispered comments in dozens of alien languages. Most of them he could understand thanks to his translation implant, and none of them were flattering. "Honored delegates," Jake began in the formal tone required by council protocol. "Earth understands that our technology may seem limited compared to your great civilizations. We have studied your hyperdrive systems and your energy manipulation techniques with great admiration." The Xanthari delegate made a sound like breaking glass, which Jake knew was their version of laughter. "Perhaps in another 1,000 years the humans will discover how to manipulate hyperspace," he said. "Until then, they should leave the important work to those of us who understand the universe." Jake nodded politely. "We recognize our current limitations. However, we believe that diversity of thought and approach can benefit any organization. Human engineers have developed some interesting solutions to complex problems using what you might consider unconventional methods." The Draconis delegate spoke for the first time. His species looked like enormous lizards covered in scales that changed color with their emotions. Right now, his scales showed the deep blue of contempt mixed with the yellow of amusement. "Interesting solutions," he repeated slowly. "Like using controlled explosions to escape their gravity well, or spinning metal tubes to generate artificial gravity." The hall erupted in laughter again. Jake waited for it to die down before continuing. "We also understand that our military contributions might seem insignificant. However, we would like to formally request that Earth be allowed to contribute ships and personnel to the Galactic Defense Force." The Helian delegate's skin rippled with patterns that Jake's implant translated as polite disbelief. "Ambassador Harrison, we have ships that can travel between stars in days rather than years. Our weapons can crack the crust of a planet, and our shields can withstand the explosion of a star. What exactly could humanity contribute to such a force?" Jake smiled the same calm smile he had practiced in diplomatic training 20 years ago. "We believe that human creativity and determination could prove valuable in unexpected ways. We also have some new technologies that might interest the Council." The Xanthari delegate's diamond body flashed with internal light, which was how his species showed extreme amusement. "New technologies," he said with obvious delight. "Let me guess. Perhaps they have discovered how to make their chemical rockets slightly more efficient. Lisa Brooks touched her communicator twice in a pattern that looked random, but Jake knew was actually a specific signal. Somewhere far away, people would be receiving that signal and beginning to put plans into motion that had been years in the making. The Vorthak. Delegates' tentacles writhed with what Jake had learned to recognize as dismissive humor. The humans cannot even generate artificial gravity without spinning their ships like children's toys. What new technology could they possibly have developed? Jake maintained his diplomatic smile even as the insults continued to flow around him. I understand your skepticism. Earth has been working on some projects that we believe show promise. We hope to demonstrate them soon. The council speaker raised one ancient hand and the hall fell silent. The human proposal has been noted and will be considered by the appropriate committees. However, given humanity's current technological limitations, any military contribution would be largely symbolic. As the session ended and delegates began to file out, Jake heard the conversations that always followed these meetings. The aliens discussed human requests like adults talking about a child who wanted to help with important work. They were patient and sometimes even fond, but they never took humans seriously. Jake gathered his papers and stood to leave. Lisa Brooks walked beside him, and he could see the anger in her eyes despite her controlled expression. They had both heard these same dismissals countless times, but it never got easier. As they reached the exit, Jake heard the Xanthari delegate speaking to his companions. At least the humans provide us with entertainment, he was saying. Their attempts to participate in galactic affairs are almost charming in their innocence. Jake touched his own communicator as they stepped into the corridor outside the council chamber. Far beneath the surface of Earth's moon, other humans were receiving signals and making final preparations for something that would change the galaxy forever. The aliens had laughed at humanity for the last time. Elena Rodriguez stepped through what looked like solid rock and felt the familiar tingle of dimensional energy around her body. The gateway hummed quietly as it folded space in ways that should have been impossible, according to every physics textbook ever written. She emerged into a corridor that stretched away in directions that hurt to think about too carefully. The facility around her existed in carefully controlled pockets of the seventh dimension. Most humans had never heard of dimensions beyond the basic three of length, width, and height. Even the most advanced alien civilizations had only discovered up to the sixth dimension. But humans had found something more. Elena walked through corridors filled with the soft blue glow of dimensional energy. Technicians moved past her carrying equipment that would have looked like magic to anyone from normal space. The walls themselves seemed to shift and breathe as if the facility was alive. In a way, it was, since the entire structure existed by bending reality around human will and human mathematics. She entered the main laboratory and immediately felt the presence of minds working on problems that spanned multiple realities. Ryan Murphy looked up from a control panel covered in equations that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously. His hands moved through holographic displays that showed mathematical relationships between spaces that most beings could not even imagine. Status report. Elena called to her team as she approached the central workspace. Around her, scientists and engineers worked on projects that would have driven most alien minds insane, just trying to understand them. The humans worked with calm focus, as if manipulating the fundamental structure of reality was just another day at the office. Ryan wiped his hands on a cloth that existed in 4 dimensions and turned to face her. The dimensional drive is operating at full capacity. We have maintained our research station in the 7th dimension for 18 months without any detection from normal space. Elena nodded and pulled up the project files on her quantum tablet. The device looked simple, but it processed information from 7 different dimensional layers simultaneously. The files contained research data that represented 50 years of secret human advancement hidden from both alien eyes and most of humanity itself. The truth was staggering when she really thought about it. While the galaxy had mastered hyperspace travel and energy manipulation, they had never discovered the higher dimensions beyond the 6th. Humans, with their strange ability to think in non-linear patterns and their talent for making intuitive leaps, had stumbled onto dimensional theory decades before making first contact with aliens. How is the construction progressing? Elena asked as she reviewed the latest technical reports. The numbers showed progress that would have been impossible in normal space, but the 7th dimension operated according to different rules. Matter behaved differently here, and time itself could be manipulated in ways that let them compress years of work into months. Ryan gestured toward the massive viewport that dominated one wall of the laboratory. Come see for yourself. Elena walked to the window and looked out at something that took her breath away every time she saw it. The construction bay stretched out in front of her, for what looked like kilometers, but distances worked differently in the seventh dimension. The space was both enormous and compact at the same time, existing in a state that normal physics said was impossible. In the center of the bay hung the Prometheus. The ship was unlike anything that existed in known space. Its hull curved and flowed like something that had grown rather than been built. The surface seemed to shift between existing and not existing, as if the ship was constantly moving between different states of reality. She is beautiful, Elena whispered as she watched maintenance crews working on the ship's exterior. The crews moved in strange patterns because they were working in 7 dimensions at once. Their tools existed in multiple realities simultaneously and could manipulate matter at levels that went beyond atomic structure. The Prometheus had been designed using principles of physics that the galaxy's greatest minds had never even theorized. Every component had been manufactured in complete secrecy, using resources harvested from dimensions where the laws of nature followed different rules. The ship's hull was composed of materials that existed in multiple dimensions at the same time, making it effectively invisible to any scanning technology that operated in normal space. The weapon systems are based on dimensional manipulation rather than energy projection, Ryan explained as they watched the final assembly processes. Instead of trying to destroy targets, we can simply move them to dimensions where they cannot affect normal space. The shields exist in 7 dimensions simultaneously, so conventional weapons literally cannot touch the ship. Elena studied the technical readouts on her tablet. The propulsion system was perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of the entire project. Instead of moving through space, the Prometheus could move through space and time itself. The ship could travel by shifting between dimensional layers rather than following the normal rules of physics. "Where is Captain Blake?" Elena asked as she watched the final systems being installed. The bridge section of the ship glowed with a soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. "She is completing the final crew training simulations," Ryan replied. "Her team has been practicing in 7th dimensional space for 2 years. They understand how to think and react in ways that normal space physics cannot prepare you for." Elena nodded with satisfaction. Susan Blake had been chosen to command the Prometheus after years of testing and evaluation. Not every human mind could handle the stress of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Blake had not only adapted to the experience but had excelled at it. Her crew of 50 represented the best of humanity in every field, from engineering to combat tactics. "How long until we can bring her home?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer from the reports she had been reading. "All systems are green," Ryan said with obvious pride. "The Prometheus is ready for dimensional emergence whenever the order comes." Elena smiled as she looked at the ship that represented decades of secret human achievement. While the galaxy had been laughing at human limitations and treating Earth like a primitive backwater civilization, humans had been quietly working on technologies that made hyperdrive look like a stone wheel. The aliens had underestimated humanity for the last time. Soon the galaxy would learn that humans were not the primitive species they appeared to be. The Prometheus was proof that human creativity and determination could overcome any obstacle, including the basic laws of physics themselves. Elena turned away from the viewport and walked back toward the dimensional gateway. She had reports to file and preparations to complete. Soon the signal would come and humanity would reveal itself to a galaxy that had never taken them seriously. The age of human secrecy was almost over. The age of human equality was about to begin. The Xanthari war fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, with the casual confidence of a superior force conducting routine business. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the tactical displays show the primitive human defenses scattered around their home planet begin scanning their orbital platforms, he ordered with the bored tone of someone who had done this same task dozens of times before. His crystalline body reflected the blue light from the ship's displays, and his voice carried the musical quality that all Xanthari possessed when they spoke. The fleet numbered 200 ships of various sizes, from massive dreadnoughts that could crack a planet's crust to smaller vessels designed for precision strikes against specific targets. Each ship represented technology that was centuries ahead of anything humans possessed, or at least anything the galaxy believed humans possessed. Tactical report. Admiral Keithvar called to his sensor officer as the fleet moved deeper into the solar system. They maintained a formation that could shift from exploration to attack configuration in seconds if needed. Standard human defenses as expected, sir, the officer replied while studying his displays. Orbital weapon platforms using chemical propulsion and primitive energy weapons. Their fleet consists of approximately 50 vessels, most of which appear to be surplus ships purchased from our own manufacturers decades ago. Admiral Keithvar nodded with satisfaction. The mission was simple and straightforward. Humanity had been making increasingly bold requests for military equality within the galactic community. The Galactic Council had decided that a demonstration of superior force would remind Earth of their proper place in the cosmic order. Deploy the fleet in bombardment formation, he ordered. We will disable their orbital defenses as a demonstration of our capabilities. Minimal casualties but maximum impact on their ability to defend themselves. Captain Susan Blake watched the approaching alien fleet from the bridge of the Prometheus. Her ship hung invisible in the seventh dimension, completely undetectable to any sensor technology that operated in normal space. The bridge around her hummed with energy that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. They are moving into attack position, reported Lieutenant Ben Foster from the tactical station. His console displayed information that would have been impossible for normal space technology to gather. The seventh-dimensional sensors could observe the alien fleet from angles that did not exist in normal physics. Blake studied the tactical display with calm professionalism. She had trained for this moment for years in simulations that tested her ability to think and react in 7 dimensions at once. Her crew of 50 had been selected from thousands of candidates and had spent months learning to work with technology that operated according to rules that most minds could not comprehend. Status of Earth's conventional defenses, Blake asked, though she already knew the answer from the mission briefings she had studied. Performing exactly as planned, Foster replied. They will put up token resistance to maintain the illusion, but they cannot seriously threaten a force of this size using conventional weapons. Blake nodded as she watched the alien ship spread out in a formation designed to demonstrate overwhelming superiority. The Zenthari had done this before to other worlds that had challenged galactic authority. They would disable defenses, cripple military capabilities, and then demand complete submission to council rule. Signal from Dimensional Command, reported the communications officer. Director Carter confirms that all observation stations are in position. The entire galaxy will witness what happens here today. Blake smiled as she thought about the hidden facilities scattered throughout human space. Each one existed in carefully maintained pockets of the 7th dimension, invisible to alien detection, but capable of recording and broadcasting everything that happened. When humanity revealed itself, the entire galaxy would see the demonstration simultaneously. All stations prepare for dimensional emergence, Blake announced to her crew. Around her, officers moved with practiced efficiency, checking systems that operated according to physics textbooks that had not been written yet. The ship's consciousness flowed through 7 dimensions simultaneously, and every crew member could feel the Prometheus, responding to their thoughts and intentions. Engineering. Reports full power to reality anchors and called the chief engineer from his station. Dimensional stability is optimal, and all emergence protocols are green. The reality anchors were perhaps the most crucial system on the ship. When the Prometheus emerged from the 7th dimension into normal space, the anchors would maintain the ship's ability to exist in multiple realities at once. Without them, the vessel would be trapped in normal space and vulnerable to conventional weapons. Navigation set emergence coordinates 3,000 kilometers off their starboard flank, Blake ordered. The positioning would put the Prometheus close enough to demonstrate their capabilities but far enough away to avoid any immediate threat from the alien fleet. Blake looked around her bridge one final time before giving the order that would change human history forever. Her crew sat ready at stations that controlled power beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. The moment they emerged from the 7th dimension, humanity would announce that they were no longer the primitive civilization everyone believed them to be. Helm, prepare for dimensional transition, Blake said in the calm voice she had practiced for years. We emerge in 3 dimensions simultaneously, so I want smooth coordination between all reality layers. The ship around her began to vibrate with harmonics that existed in spaces beyond normal perception. Energy flowed through conduits that existed in 7 dimensions at once, and the Prometheus prepared to tear through the barriers between realities. Emerging in 10 seconds, Blake announced. 5 seconds. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. Mark. Reality folded in on itself as the Prometheus forced its way from the 7th dimension into normal space. The emergence created a brilliant flash of energy that registered on every sensor within light years and announced to the universe that something impossible had just happened. The ship that materialized before the stunned alien fleet was beyond anything in known galactic technology. The hull seemed to flow like liquid while maintaining perfect structural integrity. Weapons ports opened onto spaces that clearly extended into dimensions that normal physics said could not exist. The entire vessel appeared to exist in multiple realities at the same time. On the bridge of the Zenthari, flagship alarms began screaming as sensors tried to process readings that made no sense according to any known science. Admiral Kethvar stared at displays that showed a ship existing in 7 dimensions simultaneously, with power signatures that exceeded anything in his experience. Blake opened a communication, channeled to the alien fleet, and prepared to speak, words that would echo through galactic history forever. "Attention, Zenthari fleet." Captain Blake's voice cut through space on all communication frequencies as the Prometheus hung before them like something from a dream or nightmare. "You are trespassing in human-controlled space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Admiral Kethvar recovered from his initial shock with the arrogance of a commander who had never faced a true challenge in his long military career. His crystalline features hardened as anger replaced surprise. No primitive human had ever dared to issue him an ultimatum, and he would not allow it to happen. "Now, unknown vessel, you will identify yourself and stand down immediately," he transmitted, back with authority that had cowed dozens of rebellious worlds. "This is Admiral Kethvar of the Zenthari Dominion acting under full Galactic Council authority." Blake sat calmly in her command chair as she watched the alien fleet struggle to understand what they were seeing. Their sensors were designed to operate in normal space, and could barely detect a ship that existed primarily in the 7th dimension. The readings they were getting probably looked like sensor malfunctions rather than actual data. "I am Captain Susan Blake of the Earth vessel Prometheus," she replied in a voice that carried absolute confidence. "You have exactly 60 seconds to begin your withdrawal from this system." The alien admiral's rage became visible as internal lights flashed through his crystalline body. He had crushed human resistance before, and he would do it again. The idea that any single ship could threaten his entire fleet was beyond absurd. "All ships target that vessel," Admiral Kethvar ordered with cold fury. "Maximum firepower. Destroy it completely." 200 Zenthari warships opened fire at the same moment. The space between the fleets filled with enough destructive energy to vaporize a small moon. Plasma beams bright enough to blind unprotected eyes stretched across the void. Particle cannons fired streams of matter accelerated to nearly light speed. Gravitational disruptors tried to tear apart the very fabric of space around their target. The weapons passed harmlessly through the space where the Prometheus hung, as if the ship existed in a reality where their attacks simply could not reach it. Energy that could have cracked a planet's crust flowed around the human vessel like water around a stone. Blake watched the light show with professional interest. "Impressive display," she commented to her crew. "Their weapons technology is actually quite advanced for 3-dimensional physics." Lieutenant Foster studied his tactical displays as the alien weapons continued to fire uselessly at their ship. "They are concentrating all firepower on our position, but none of their energy signatures can penetrate into the 7th dimension." "Our turn," Blake said calmly as she activated the ship's primary systems. "Mr. Foster engaged the dimensional displacement array. Let us give them a practical demonstration of what 7-dimensional technology can accomplish." Foster's hands moved across controls that existed in multiple realities simultaneously. The Prometheus did not fire weapons in any conventional sense. Instead, reality around 3 of the nearest Zenthari ships simply changed in ways that normal physics said were impossible. The affected vessels found themselves existing in 7 dimensions at the same time. Their hulls stretched across space and time in directions that made their crews experience existence from perspectives that no 3-dimensional mind could possibly comprehend. The ships did not explode or collapse, but they ceased to exist in normal space while remaining perfectly intact in higher dimensional layers. What happened to them? Admiral Kethvar demanded, as his sensors showed 3 of his ships simply vanishing from normal space. His voice cracked with the first notes of real fear he had felt in decades of military service. "They are perfectly safe," Blake replied in the same calm tone she might use to discuss the weather. "They are experiencing reality from a slightly broader perspective. We can return them to normal space at any time, assuming you are willing to discuss reasonable terms." The remaining Zenthari ships fired again with desperate fury. This time they concentrated their entire fleet's firepower on the single human vessel. Enough energy to sterilize a planet's surface struck the space around the Prometheus, with thunderous force that lit up the void like a newborn star. The result was identical to their first attempt. The weapons simply could not touch a ship that existed primarily in dimensions they could not reach. The Prometheus hung in space completely undamaged, while energy readings from the attack probably looked like background radiation to their sensors. Blake decided it was time for a more impressive demonstration. She activated the ship's primary offensive capabilities, and space around the alien fleet began to ripple and fold like fabric being manipulated by invisible hands. The Prometheus was manipulating the fundamental structure of reality itself, using technology that treated the known laws of physics as suggestions rather than absolute rules. 50 more. Zenthari ships found themselves gently displaced into higher dimensions. Their crews experienced the indescribable wonder and terror of existing in 7-dimensional space while their vessels remained completely intact but unreachable from normal reality. Admiral Kethvar watched his tactical display in growing horror as half his fleet was systematically neutralized by a single human ship using technology he could not begin to understand. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were being removed from the battlefield, without suffering any damage but also without any ability to fight back. "Admiral, you now have 150 ships remaining." Blake's voice cut through the chaos on his bridge. "I can continue this demonstration indefinitely, or you can return to the Galactic Council and inform them that humanity is claiming our rightful place among the galaxy's powers." Kethvar stared at his displays, as more of his vessels simply vanished from normal space. His fleet, the pride of the Zenthari military, was being defeated by technology that made their most advanced weapons look like primitive tools. "What are you?" he whispered into his communicator. Blake's smile was visible on the transmission channel. "We are humans, and we have been waiting a very long time for you to take us seriously." The demonstration continued as more alien ships were displaced into dimensions where they could not threaten anyone, but also could not return to normal space. Without human assistance, the message was clear. Humanity possessed power beyond galactic comprehension, and they were no longer willing to be treated as primitive children. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Admiral Kethvar's panicked report reaching the core worlds. Representatives from dozens of species gathered in the Great Crystal Hall, but the atmosphere was completely different from any previous meeting. The casual arrogance and dismissive laughter that had defined galactic politics for millennia had been replaced by nervous whispers and fearful glances. Jake Harrison entered the chamber to find every eye focused on him with an intensity that made the air feel thick and heavy. The Helian representative who had suggested just days earlier that humans should stick to farming and entertainment could not meet his gaze. The Vorthak delegate's tentacles moved in patterns that Jake's translator identified as extreme anxiety mixed with barely controlled terror. "The floor recognizes the human delegation," announced the council speaker in a voice that trembled despite his thousands of years of experience. The ancient Valdris had presided over countless sessions, but had never faced a situation quite like this one. Harrison walked to the central podium with the same calm demeanor he had maintained through years of mockery and dismissal. But now every representative in the vast hall hung on his words as if their lives depended on understanding what he might say next. "Honored delegates," he began in the same formal tone he had always used, "Earth would like to formally request a revision of our classification within the galactic community." The Zenthari representative rose shakily to his feet. This was not Admiral Kethvar, but a replacement sent after the Admiral had suffered what military doctors were calling seventh-dimensional shock. His crystalline features showed stress fractures that spoke of deep psychological trauma. "Ambassador Harrison," he said in a voice like breaking glass, "we must ask, how long has humanity possessed this technology? Our sensors recorded capabilities that should not be possible according to any known science." Harrison smiled the same quiet smile he had worn during years of alien superiority and condescension. "Which technology specifically? We have been exploring dimensional physics for quite some time. The Prometheus is merely our first practical application of the principles we have discovered." Elena Rodriguez materialized beside Harrison, not through any transportation technology the Council recognized, but by simply stepping sideways through dimensional space. The casual display of impossible science sent several representatives scrambling toward the exits while others sat frozen in their seats. "Honored delegates," Rodriguez began with the calm authority of someone who had spent years working with forces beyond galactic comprehension. "Humanity has no desire for conquest or dominance. We simply wish to be recognized as equals in the galactic community." The truth that Harrison did not mention was even more staggering than the aliens could imagine. The human facility existed entirely in the seventh dimension, invisible to any detection method the galaxy possessed. Earth had been secretly harvesting resources from multiple dimensional layers and building technologies that made their current achievements look primitive. The Vorthak delegate managed to speak despite his obvious terror. His massive tentacles quivered as he formed words in the universal trade language. "What do you want from us? What are your demands?" Harrison's expression remained pleasant and diplomatic. "Trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, mutual defense pacts, technology sharing arrangements. The same things we have always wanted. The difference is that now we are asking as equals rather than supplicants begging for scraps." The Dracones, representative whose scales had shown contempt and amusement just days earlier, now displayed the deep purple of fear, mixed with the gray of submission. "You could destroy any of our fleets. You could conquer entire star systems. Why do you still want peaceful cooperation?" Rodriguez stepped forward, and her presence seemed to make the air itself shimmer with dimensional energy. "Because conquest achieves nothing worthwhile. We have learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality itself. Why would we want to rule over others when we can explore infinite possibilities across multiple dimensions?" Deep beneath the lunar surface, Director Alex Carter watched the proceedings with satisfaction, while monitoring the construction of 12 more vessels like the Prometheus. Each new ship incorporated improvements based on lessons learned from their first emergence into normal space. The galaxy would have time to adjust to humanity's new status, but they would also understand that the age of treating Earth as a backwater civilization was permanently over. The Helian delegate's liquid silver skin rippled with patterns that showed confusion, mixed with desperate hope. "If you possess such advanced technology, why have you hidden it from us? We could have been working together for decades." Harrison's smile became slightly wider. "We tried to work together. For 200 years we offered our assistance and were told to focus on growing crops and making entertainment. We decided to develop our capabilities in private until we were ready to contribute as equals." Captain Susan Blake guided the Prometheus through dimensional space as she patrolled the outer edges of the solar system. Her ship remained hidden in the seventh dimension, but she could monitor normal space communications and watch as news of humanity's reveal spread throughout the galaxy. Her crew had performed flawlessly during their first mission, and now they had the honor of protecting Earth as their species took its rightful place among the stars. The council speaker raised his ancient hand, and the hall fell completely silent. "What assurances can you give us that humanity will use these capabilities responsibly? The power you have demonstrated could reshape the galaxy." Rodriguez's answer carried the weight of years of careful consideration. "We offer the same assurance that any advanced civilization provides. We will act according to our values and principles. We believe in cooperation over conquest and growth over destruction. Our actions will demonstrate our intentions better than any words." Harrison added his own thoughts to her statement. "Earth proposes the establishment of a joint research initiative. We will share some of our dimensional research in exchange for access to galactic knowledge in other fields. Together, we can explore possibilities that none of us could achieve alone. The session continued for hours as delegates asked questions and made proposals, but the fundamental change had already occurred. Humanity was no longer the primitive species that others tolerated out of politeness. They were now partners in shaping the future of galactic civilization. The galaxy had laughed at humans for 2 centuries, dismissing them as irrelevant primitives. They had never imagined that while alien civilizations mastered 3-dimensional space, humanity had been quietly exploring the infinite possibilities that lay beyond the boundaries of normal reality. The laughter had stopped forever. The age of human partnership with the cosmos had begun.